Hello and welcome to State of the Economy. Today we have with us Professor Charan Singh, who teaches at IIM Bangalore. He's a professor of economics, but more than that, he is an RBI chair professor at the IIM Bangalore, and he's worked many years in the RBI, and he was director banking research. So we thought he's the right person for us to talk about the banking sector, the state of the banking sector today, and the crisis that the Indian banking sector could be going into. Finance Minister Mr. Arun Jaitley said just 2-3 days ago that the levels of non-performing assets in Indian banks, particularly public sector banks, is unacceptable. In fact, many analysts and observers have said that banking really is the lifeblood for the economy, and it reflects the health of the economy. And if banks are in a bad state, can the economy recover? This is a big question many economists and analysts have raised. So we'll discuss this complex problem with Professor Charan Singh, who, by the way, has also worked at the IMF. Welcome to our show, Professor Charan Singh. Now, you've had a good view of the financial systems, global as well as Indian. Global, while you were at the IMF, when you were part of evaluation, the independent evaluation committee at IMF, and at the RBI for many years, where you were director of banking research, and now you're teaching at IIM Bangalore. So, how do you see the present crisis in the Indian banking system, as it were? First of all, what is the nature of the crisis, or whether it's a crisis at all? The voices that we hear, even from the government, seem to suggest that there is a lot of worry.
Thanks for inviting me to this show, and thanks for this beautiful question. Look, I understand that the non-performing assets are high, nearly 13% of the advances, which is reasonably high. But I don't think it's a cause of worry, because in 1994, when we started the reforms, our non-performing assets were nearly 19%. If you look back just about 10 years back in 2001, 2002, 2003, our non-performing assets were also 13%. We are an expert in managing things, and we were successful in bringing down the non-performing assets to less than 2%. So I don't see it's a cause of worry. Why I say it's not a cause of worry for me? Because as a professor of economics, I like to see the reasons why this happened. And if we look at the reasons, we know that there are a few priority sector areas, priority sector not in the sense of the priority sector, but few industries where they have come up. Iron and steel is one, textile is another. Now, aviation is another, infrastructure is still another. Aviation is part of
the biggest non-performing assets are in the infrastructure sector.
They're coming from various components of infrastructure. Aviation is one.
Telecom.
Telecom is another.
Roads. Yes. Power. Power is very big.
Power is another one. Now, if these are the institutions, these are the industries from which the non-performing assets are emerging, then one should go into deep and say, why did this happen in these sectors? So we know what is happening in the steel industry. China is dumping and our domestic steel industry is suffering. We also know what happened in aviation. There is a problem.
China is also dumping tires, chemicals, aluminium.
Yes.
So there's a whole range of commodities where China is dumping into.
Yeah, but if you look at the non-performing assets emerging from industries, the 5-6 are important, but there are many others from which it is emerging. Okay. So the key thing is to find out what is the cause. Now, if the cause is cogent, now when these public sector banks, where NPAs are much higher than the private and foreign sector banks, if you look at these public sector banks, they were in the forefront of lending to these sectors. Now, they at one point of time thought it's very good investment, and correctly so. Secondly, public sector banks account for nearly 75% of total banking, so they had to be in the forefront for infrastructure. But because there is a slowdown of growth, not only in India, globally, it has impacted them. So I don't think this is a cause of, we know the reasons, and we know the reasons are exogenous, and now that once we have recognized the reasons, we can fix it.
Are you saying that reasons are entirely exogenous, or also partially endogenous, the manner of lending or quality of lending by banks?
I would say that I would...
I want to make a point here. You're right that public sector banks were in the forefront and they lent to all these sectors which were indeed, which reflected the India growth story. Like infrastructure was the India growth story before the 2009 global financial crisis. There were other sectors too, telecom. It's a big success story in India, but many telecom companies are also down. Now, after the 2009 global financial crisis, what was seen was these very public sector banks actually came forward and rescued some of these companies.
Exactly.
Right.
That's what I say. Their role cannot be just ignored. They played a very prominent role in the growth story.
So now, but the private sector banks did not, immediately after the 2009 global crisis, the private sector banks did not increase their exposure much,
they shied away.
They shied away.
They shied away from these risky areas.
So are public sector banks today suffering because they extended themselves after the 2009 crisis? Would you say that? Well, partially?
Yeah, well, I would like to agree partially to what you are saying. When I said exogenous, I do not mean that some of the loans that were extended were due diligence wasn't done. I mean everything was done. But yes, probably they could have diversified. Yeah. They put too much into too few sectors, and that's why when those sectors suffered, the whole scenario changed as far as non-performing assets are concerned. Had they diversified, or had they diversified their risk-taking, not only their portfolios, probably situation would have been better. To that extent, yes, I would agree that there was little laxity. But as any banker...
Also, not only laxity, there was also... some would even argue that public sector banks, probably under political pressure, were forced to throw more good money after bad money. Again, concentrated in some, say, 30-40 projects in infrastructure which were not performing. And these were also owned by some 10 or 15 industrial houses who are powerful. So there is a crony capitalist angle also there,
I would agree,
which the private sector didn't get into that trap.
I would agree with that, but that also means our legal system probably needs to be strengthened further. And recognition of non-performing assets has to be much earlier than actually they become non-performing assets.
So these are problems which are endemic to the public sector also.
And it's very difficult to digest that the industrialists, like employees, are not getting their salaries, but the industrialists are going in very rich manner and flying and running whatever they were doing earlier.
Their personal wealth has not suffered.
Personal wealth has not suffered. So I think that's the legal side which needs to be strengthened. And how do we really recover those? So I think the legal aspect needs to be strengthened. I would agree with you on that aspect. But generally, I would say the public sector banks played a very good role in India's growth story.
Of course, about that there is no doubt,
And my reading is when the public sector banks went into this investment, they were looking at the robust growth trend. They were also looking at the promising industry that it was. And so therefore, I would not doubt their intentions at all.
Sure. So tell me, Professor Charan Singh, what is the scale of the problem? We hear varying interpretations of the exact amount of NPAs. Some say there are NPAs and there are restructured assets which are also close to being NPAs. Now we have this new framework 5/25 where loans which have gone nearly bad or have gone bad actually, the RBI is allowing banks to prolong the maturities to up to 20-25 years. Big corporate houses have actually, who otherwise have done very well, have been cash rich, have also elongated the maturity of loans to 20-25 years, 30 years. So what is going on? I mean, what's your sense if you studied the whole sector?
Well, 525 is an international thing. It's not that it's unique to India, because it's basically a story of the maturity mismatches which take place between assets and liabilities. So it's an international thing and it's very good India adopted it. Banks generally are comfortable in lending for a period of 5 to 7 years, say 10 years. But there are projects which have gestation period of more than 20 years, sometimes 25 years. Look, the World Bank generally lends for 50 years because that comes for reconstruction. IMF generally lends for less than 5 years because it's firefighting. Now, universal commercial banks that we have in India are doing both the roles. Sometimes they are doing short-term financing and sometimes they...
I take this point of yours. In fact, as a framework, this is
a very
all right, what are you saying? But the RBI governor recently said that a lot of Indian capitalists, especially big business houses, they practice what he described as risk-free capitalism.
So that
they have a good time when times are good, when there is growth, but when growth slips, there's a shock, global recession, they still have a good time. So how do you come out of this?
So the 525 was basically designed keeping in mind the following. Firstly, promoters will bring in some share of theirs.
Okay.
Now in India, what happens is the governor rightly
observed, also being asked to sacrifice?
So promoters hardly bring in their money.
Yeah.
So therefore, the 525 never succeeded.
Okay.
Firstly, promoters don't bring in their money. Now, secondly, just take this example. State Bank of India has done some financing. I don't know if you realize how the 525 works. It works like a relay race.
Okay.
Each bank holds it for 5 years, and then after 5 years, it goes to the next bank.
It's like consortium lending, but in a relay
It's a relay. Yeah. Consortium is simultaneously risk sharing.
Yeah, it's a consortium, but in a relay format.
This is a relay format. So State Bank of India has given some loan somewhere. 5 years later, Punjab National Bank can take over that portfolio.
Okay.
Now, in that, legal aspects have a very big role to play.
Okay.
So legal aspects in our country are yet not so robust that guarantees given and all those things move exactly after 5 years.
Okay.
So I think the 525 scheme is a very good scheme, meets international standards, handles the mismatch as far as asset liabilities are concerned. But we were yet not ready. Firstly, the promoters are not ready to bring in their money. They want everything risk-free and they want every bank to give it.
So you're saying that this will also make promoters accountable to some extent?
Yes, that is the reason it didn't take off, because promoters just don't want the risk, don't want to take the risk.
Okay.
And that's why 525 is languishing.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's a very good scheme.
So now it seems that it's working now.
It should work if it's properly implemented and legal aspects are taken care. Okay. Sometimes I feel that sometimes we put the cart before the horse. Okay. And I think probably this is what happened in 525.
Okay. We'll take a small break here and come back to this discussion. Please don't go away and keep watching RSTV. Welcome back to State of the Economy. We are talking to Professor Charan Singh, RBI Chair Professor at IIM Bangalore, on the state of the banking industry in India. Professor Charan Singh, you recently interviewed the Secretary Banking, Mr. Hasmukh Adia. He visited your IIM Bangalore, and that's where you had this interaction with him. Now, tell me, what is the sense you get from the banking secretary? Because he's the man who has a bird's eye view of the banking sector. What is the sense you get about where the banking industry is headed, issues like bank capitalization? Do banks need capital? How much do they need? Some big amounts were announced recently. The government committed to put 70,000 crore as fresh capital in Indian banks, hoping that they would raise about 110,000 crore themselves from the market over the next 4-5 years. This is to also take care of future lending, also partly to take care of some of the finances which are frozen because of the non-performing assets. So how do you see this panning out?
Well, I did have this interview. It's on the IMB website. It also played on some channels. Let me tell you, I was very impressed. I think the country, as far as banking is concerned, is in very safe hands. My sense of interaction with him, and that shows in that YouTube, you will see, is that he's totally on top of the situation. Also, let me mention, in such a short time, look at the changes that they have brought in. They have spoken about the payments bank. Small banks are expected to be out soon. They are changing the governance pattern of the banking sector. And Jan Dhan accounts, we all know.
How are they changing the governance pattern? I've heard some details, but not...
So they have...
Did he speak about that in your conversation?
He did mention about the governance pattern, but you have just seen a few days back, they have said how they are going to do it. Of course, what I feel is that within such a short span of time, so much has been done. It's very, very impressive. One thing which...
I have heard that the appointment system that they have created to appoint bank chairman, managing director chairman is now pretty professional.
Yes.
It's not politically determined. Is that the sense you get?
That's exactly the sense I get. They have announced for 5 banks, chairmen are different, managing directors are different. I think that's very, very interesting development, governance issue. I also think that they have taken 2 people from the private sector bank. I don't think they should be shy of taking more. The reason is that public sector banks have contributed a lot of personal to the private sector banks. Most of the private sector banks, whenever they started, they drew a lot from the public sector
State
banks.
Bank of India has supplied all the top human resource, top level human
Punjab
resource.
National Bank, Central Bank of India,
sector.
State Bank of
Even
India.
ICICI.
So therefore, now when the private sector bank people want to come back and serve the nation through the public sector bank at lower salaries, I think they should be welcome. And I also.
But is that happening? They're inviting private sector.
2 announcements were done in the recent selection of 10 people. But later on, I heard that the government says rest of it will not be coming from the private sector bank. I think they should not shy. They should bring the private sector bank people because it's an interaction. If public sector banks can improve their health and performance by getting drafting on the private sector experience, why not? And they're not doing a favor. After all, when they started, they took people from the public sector bank. So I think that's a very good thing he has done. The other thing, look at the payments bank, which he has introduced. I think it's a paradigm shift that he has brought in, the government has brought in. In the payment bank system, we all know about the various salient features of it.
A lot of new private sector players.
They've just announced a list of 10. And
so they will just take deposits and facilitate payments, right?
Remittances. Basically, it's going to facilitate remittances. Now, India is such a diverse country. Universal banking, which are commercial.
How does this change the banking landscape, this payment bank which was announced last week?
This is going to really change the landscape in a very big way. Firstly, it's going to cater to small depositors and are also going to cater to a large extent to the migrant laborers. And they'll be able to do the remittances through this. Now, where are they doing it so far? They're doing it through the private channels. And therefore, the banking system is missing out on all this. So the payments banks are going to play this role of basically remittances.
They're doing through private channels as in...
It's really, I would not know
if you could explain the...
Yeah, so I did interview some people when I was working on financial inclusion. And it's very, very simple. It's very easy. It's very fast. Take an example of auto rickshaw driver from Bihar working in Bombay. He can make a telephone call and the next signal somebody comes, collects the money. And within 24 hours, generally within 6 hours, the money reaches his house. In Bihar, in a village in Bihar. So this payment bank is basically going to take care of that money. The remittances will start moving through the official channel now. So I think it's very good. Will it succeed 100%? I'm not sure on day one. They have already listed 11 institutions which can become payment banks. But I think financial literacy will have to spread. Work will have to be done. But I'm sure because technology firms have been roped in, and I'm sure the cost of such delivery will come down rapidly now. So far, what were the official channels, either through the banking system or through post office, money orders, right? Now, the technology will play a role much faster and at a cheaper cost. So I think it will change the paradigm. There will be a paradigm shift in this. The second paradigm shift that I see coming is from the small banks. And Governor has just announced that by the end of this month or next month, small banks will come into existence. About 71 odd small banks have applied for licenses. The RBI has released that list
and they'll
in
have
public domain.
They'll have a lower capitalization threshold.
Just about 100 crore of capitalization. But the focus is going to be on small and marginal farmers, agriculture. So 50% of the balance sheet will be agriculture devoted, rest will be others. It could be MSMEs. I think that's another paradigm shift that's going to emerge with the small banks. All this happening within 14 to 18 months of a new government coming in shows that they're ready to act and they have some game plan. My only thought is...
Tell me, I mean, this framework is fine, what are you talking about? No quarrel with all these new ideas that are being put in place. Now, do you think that some of these ideas will get at least temporarily stymied or get a setback because of this current global growth shock that we are experiencing? Because if you are constantly in damage control mode, for instance, if China slows down by say 2 percentage points, and as you said in your initial comments that the commodity price collapse, if it leads to banks dealing in the next 2 years with just NPAs in steel sector, infrastructure, power, etc. So how will some of the new ideas in this period take root? Can it happen simultaneously, or do you think first you'll have to deal with this banking crisis and then really look at some of these new ideas?
Well, I beg to differ from you. I don't want to call it a banking crisis at all, because I know the reasons why this happened, and these are cogent reasons. So I don't want to call it a banking crisis at all. The second thing is because we are diversifying banking activities.
No, I'm not saying this, the government is saying it's unacceptable. Even Arun Jaitley has said that the levels of NPAs is unacceptable as it is now.
Yes, I agree. As a Minister of Finance, he's right in saying that he's conveying a message that I'm going to go full speed.
That we need to fix it.
We need to fix it. I think I appreciate that coming from the Minister. But as an academician and as a person who has been into this for a couple of decades now, I'm very confident we can handle it. So I'm not worried at all. We will handle it. Now the issue is this payment banks, small banks coming, and in the meantime there's a turmoil taking place in the international market while America and Europe are recovering, China is sinking. And now what is this turmoil going to do?
Is Europe recovering? I mean, that's also in...
Yeah, it's also in a difficult situation, yes, but you know, they also have their own problems, like Greece comes up every now and then Italy happens.
In fact, even America goes little yo-yoing. Last quarter it was, less than 1%, so...
Yeah, but I was hearing this phrase, it's our Swami Vivekananda had said it. He said, if you come across a day when there is no problem, that means you're on the wrong path. Right? So therefore, the issue is that these problems will always stay, they will always keep coming. Sometimes America, sometimes Africa, Latin America, Europe, this will happen. But I think the very fact that we are diversifying and we are giving different segments of the society, different banking instruments and different banking schemes, I think is a very stabilizing fact. So payment banks takes care of one segment of the society, small banks are going to take place another segment of the society. Small banks to me is something like Mudra Bank.
Mudra Bank,
Mudra was taking care of the micro enterprises, small banks are going to take. So to my mind, this is a great diversifying exercise that is taking place. Now,
and these could lend to small entrepreneurs, which probably is not happening on such a structured way by big banks today.
Big banks are not even catering to this. They don't even have the specialization to cater to this segment of the society. It has been neglected for 70 odd years. And that's why you had to start the Jan Dhan. So therefore, my reading is this is a very good measure. Now, there are two things which emerge. One is the factor that you said, yuan and renminbi, what is happening on the currency front.
The yuan devaluation.
The devaluation that took place.
Negative impact on India.
And its negative impact on India, as well as what is happening today in the currency market, as you were mentioning. So, and then how does the world trade pattern change and the growth shock, the word which you used, there could be another mild growth shock to the world that is taking place. That is one thing. That's external. I would like to have share my thoughts on it.
Exogenous shock.
Exogenous shocks. The other is the internal thing. Now, one thought that comes in my mind repeatedly is we started the Jan Dhan account. 16 crore accounts have been opened against the base of 1,28,000 crores which existed in this country. Now, all our Jan Dhan accounts were opened by the public sector banks. 16 crore, private sector banks only opened about 60 lakhs, right? Now, the issue is, if we are going to have small banks, and small banks are going to cater to small areas, like they are going to be replacing sort of local area banks and regional rural banks. So, would they have been more adept and efficient in opening Jan Dhan accounts?
You say they would have been better placed.
They would have been better placed. So, did we
And here I also want to make another point. There are exogenous shocks which you cannot avoid, coming from China or wherever, Europe. Now, in this situation, the pressure on our big banking, big public sector banks increases further. So, in this situation, should you put more cost pressure on public sector banks? Precisely because Jan Dhan requires, Jan Dhan does have costs, right? So, so I agree with you. Should it not be done through smaller banks? Or should you just depend on some 10, 15 big PSU banks to drive Jan Dhan? That much more pressure on them,
So I would say Did we place the cart before the horse again?
Yeah.
Should we have waited for a year, let the small banks come and given them this first task of go now spread the banking system into the rural areas? The public sector banks probably would have continued to devote their energy to bigger industry.
Yeah.
Probably NPS levels would not have been so high as they emerged in the last.
Exactly. That's the point I wanted to
because they focus so much on Jan Dhan. Means I sometimes do surveys in Bangalore and adjoining areas. Many times I would go to a branch where the staff, oh, they're opening Jan Dhan accounts. Who's monitoring the existing accounts? Hardly anybody. Service quality suffered. So therefore, that brings...
We're talking about focus now.
I'm now saying...
The big banks should focus on
niche areas should be earmarked.
Smaller banks can focus on small entrepreneurs, MSMEs.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
So I think there is a big paradigm shift that the new government has brought in. We had Narsimhan 1, Narsimhan 2, two reports on the banking. Probably we need one more report on banking which lays out the game plan.
Okay.
What will be the payment bank's role? What will be the small banks? What will be the larger banks?
A kind of next 20 years.
A roadmap.
What many layered economic activities and which layer will be supported by which sort of financial system.
Yes.
It makes sense.
Yes. So I'm saying
thank you very much for talking to us, Professor Charan Singh. I'm just running out of time. That's all we have in this edition of State of the Economy. We'll be back with you next week. Thanks for watching.